In her 15 years as a licensed therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Jennifer Adams had helped countless clients work through family trauma and abandonment issues. At 48, she was respected in her field for her ability to maintain professional boundaries while providing compassionate care to people dealing with the most difficult experiences of their lives. But when 29-year-old Marcus Williams walked into her office seeking help with adoption-related anxiety, she found herself staring at a young man whose eyes were identical to her own, and whose story of searching for his birth mother mirrored the deepest regrets of her professional and personal life. What began as a routine intake session would become the most challenging hour of Jennifer's career, forcing her to confront a choice she'd made 30 years earlier and question everything she believed about professional ethics, personal boundaries, and the power of fate to bring people together. Dr. Jennifer Adams had built her therapy practice around helping people heal from childhood trauma, family abandonment, and identity issues. Her office in Atlanta's Virginia Highland District was a sanctuary where clients felt safe exploring their deepest fears and painful memories. Jennifer specialized in adoption-related counseling, having written articles on attachment theory and spoken at conferences about helping adoptees process feelings of abandonment and search for identity. What her colleagues and clients didn't know was that Jennifer's expertise in adoption trauma came from deeply personal experience. 30 years earlier, when she was 18 and fresh out of high school in small-town Georgia, Jennifer had become pregnant with her boyfriend Michael's child. Michael was heading to college on a football scholarship, and Jennifer had dreams of studying psychology. Both families had been devastated by the pregnancy, and Jennifer had felt she had no choice but to place the baby for adoption. The adoption had been arranged through a Catholic charity in Atlanta. Jennifer had chosen a young couple, David and Linda Williams, who seemed perfect. He was a teacher, she was a nurse, and they'd been trying to have children for years. Jennifer had specifically requested a closed adoption, believing it would be easier for everyone if there was no ongoing contact. She'd said goodbye to her son at the hospital and tried to move forward with her life. Jennifer had thrown herself into her education, earning her bachelor's degree in psychology, then a master's in counseling, and finally her doctorate in clinical psychology. Every step of her academic and professional journey had been motivated by her desire to help others navigate the kind of trauma she'd experienced. She'd never married, never had other children, and had built her entire identity around being a healer for people dealing with family separation and loss. In November 2024, Jennifer received a call from her receptionist about a new client who needed urgent appointment scheduling. Marcus Williams, age 29, was dealing with severe anxiety related to his upcoming marriage. According to the intake notes, Marcus was adopted and had been experiencing panic attacks as his wedding approached, triggered by fears about family medical history and concerns about his identity. Jennifer had worked with many adoptees over the years and was familiar with the complex emotions that major life events could trigger. Weddings, births, and other family milestones often intensified adoptees' feelings about their unknown origins and missing family connections. She scheduled Marcus for a Thursday afternoon appointment, expecting it to be a straightforward case of pre-wedding anxiety that could be addressed with cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. When Marcus Williams walked into Jennifer's office, she immediately noticed something familiar about his appearance. He was tall and athletic, with dark hair and unusual green eyes that reminded her of someone, though she couldn't place who. His manner was polite, but nervous, and he seemed genuinely distressed about the anxiety he'd been experiencing. "Dr. Adams, thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Marcus began as he settled into the chair across from her desk. "I'm getting married in 3 months, and I've been having these panic attacks that I can't seem to control." Jennifer began with her standard questions about his symptoms, when they'd started, and what might be triggering them. Marcus explained that the anxiety had begun when he and his fiancée started discussing having children. "Sarah wants to know about family medical history, genetic predispositions, things like that. And I realize I don't know anything about my biological family." As Marcus continued talking, Jennifer found herself studying his features more carefully. The shape of his nose, the way he gestured with his hands, his laugh, everything seemed hauntingly familiar. When he mentioned that he'd been adopted through a Catholic charity in Atlanta, Jennifer's hands began to tremble slightly. "Tell me about your adoption," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice professional. "What do you know about the circumstances?" Marcus's story unfolded in a way that made Jennifer's heart race. He'd been born in Atlanta in 1995, adopted as a newborn by David and Linda Williams. His adoptive parents had been open about the adoption and had shared what little they knew about his birth mother, that she'd been young, that the adoption had been closed at her request, and that she'd seemed like a caring person who wanted the best for her child. "My parents are wonderful," Marcus continued. "They couldn't love me more if I were their biological son. But I've always wondered about my birth mother, who she was, why she gave me up, whether she ever thinks about me. And now that I'm about to get married and potentially have children of my own, those questions feel more urgent." Jennifer excused herself to get water, but really she needed a moment to compose herself. In the hallway outside her office, she leaned against the wall and tried to process what was happening. Marcus Williams, adopted in Atlanta in 1995 by David and Linda Williams. The names, the timeline, the adoption agency all matched the son she'd placed for adoption 30 years earlier. When Jennifer returned to her office, she noticed details about Marcus that she'd missed before. A small scar on his chin that she remembered from when he was born. The way he tilted his head when he was thinking, which reminded her of her own father. Most convincingly, his hands. Long fingers and a distinctive thumb shape that was identical to her own. "Marcus," Jennifer said carefully, "do you remember the name of the adoption agency that handled your placement?" "St. Joseph's Catholic Charities," Marcus replied. "My parents gave me all the paperwork when I turned 18, in case I ever wanted to search for my birth family. I've thought about it, but I didn't want to hurt my parents' feelings." St. Joseph's Catholic Charities, the same agency Jennifer had worked with 30 years earlier. The final piece of confirmation she needed. She was sitting across from her son, the baby she'd given birth to and said goodbye to 3 decades ago, and he was asking for her help dealing with anxiety about his adoption. Jennifer faced an impossible professional and ethical dilemma. She couldn't continue treating Marcus without revealing their relationship, but she also couldn't reveal their relationship without violating every principle of therapeutic boundaries she'd ever learned. Marcus needed help, but Jennifer was the last person who should be providing it. "Marcus, I need to ask you something that might seem unusual," Jennifer said, her voice barely steady. "Have you ever tried to search for your birth mother? Have you registered with any reunion services or DNA databases?" "I've thought about it," Marcus admitted, "especially lately. I keep wondering if she ever thinks about me, if she regrets her decision, if she'd want to know how I turned out. But I'm also scared. What if she doesn't want contact? What if finding her disappoints both of us?" Jennifer's heart was breaking. For 30 years, she'd wondered the same things about Marcus. Not a day had passed without her thinking about him, wondering if he was happy, hoping he'd grown into a good man. And here he was, directly in front of her, expressing the same longing for connection that she'd carried all these years. "What would you want to say to her if you could find her?" Jennifer asked, abandoning any pretense of professional distance. Marcus thought for a moment. "I'd want to thank her. I'd want her to know that her decision gave me a wonderful life. My parents are amazing people who've supported every dream I've ever had. I'm a teacher now, just like my dad, and I love working with kids. I'm marrying an incredible woman who makes me feel complete. I'd want my birth mother to know that her sacrifice led to happiness, not tragedy." Jennifer had to excuse herself again, this time to the bathroom where she cried quietly for several minutes. Her son had grown into exactly the kind of person she'd hoped he would become. Kind, thoughtful, grateful, and happy. The decision she'd agonized over for 30 years had indeed given him the life she'd wanted for him. When Jennifer returned, she made a decision that went against every principle of therapeutic practice she'd ever learned. "Marcus, I need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible. But before I do, I want you to know that you've grown into an extraordinary young man, and whoever your birth mother is, she would be incredibly proud of you." Marcus looked confused. "Dr. Adams, what are you trying to say?" Jennifer took a deep breath and abandoned her professional role entirely. "I'm trying to say that your birth mother is sitting right here. I gave birth to you on March 15th, 1995, at Northside Hospital. I placed you for adoption through St. Joseph's Catholic Charities because I was 18 years old and believed you deserved better than what I could provide." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. Marcus stared at Jennifer, then looked down at his hands, then back at her face. She could see him processing the information, looking for resemblances, trying to understand how this was possible. "You're my birth mother?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "I am. And for 30 years I've wondered every single day whether you were happy, whether you were loved, whether I made the right choice. Hearing you talk about your life, about David and Linda, about your fiancé and your career, you've answered every question I've carried all these years." What happened next surprised them both. Instead of anger or confusion, Marcus felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced. "I used to imagine what you looked like," he said quietly. "I thought you might be a teacher or a counselor, someone who cared about helping people. I never imagined you'd become exactly the kind of person I'd meet when I was struggling." The rest of the session became a conversation between mother and son, rather than therapist and client. Jennifer shared her story, the pregnancy, the difficult decision, her career choice motivated by her experience with adoption trauma. Marcus talked about his childhood, his relationship with his adoptive parents, his hopes for the future. Jennifer immediately referred Marcus to another therapist for his ongoing anxiety treatment, recognizing that she could no longer serve as his counselor. But she also gave him her personal contact information and an invitation to build a relationship outside the therapeutic context. Over the following months, Jennifer and Marcus carefully developed a relationship that honored both her role as birth mother and his bonds with his adoptive family. David and Linda Williams welcomed Jennifer into their extended family, understanding that love multiplies rather than divides. They were grateful to finally meet the woman who'd given them their son, and who dedicated her career to helping people heal from the kind of trauma she'd experienced herself. Marcus's anxiety about his wedding and future family diminished significantly once he had answers to his questions about his origins. He invited Jennifer to his wedding, where she sat with David and Linda Williams, all of them celebrating the young man they'd helped shape in different ways. Jennifer's experience with Marcus changed her approach to her practice as well. She became an advocate for open adoption and for therapeutic practices that recognize the complex emotions involved in family separation and reunion. Her story became a powerful example of how professional and personal boundaries can sometimes intersect in ways that challenge conventional wisdom about therapeutic relationships. Today, Jennifer maintains both her practice and her relationship with Marcus. She's become a grandmother figure to Marcus and Sarah's children, and she often reflects on how her choice to specialize in adoption counseling led her back to the son she'd never stopped loving. Marcus credits Jennifer with helping him understand that some coincidences are too meaningful to be mere chance, and that sometimes the people we're meant to find are the ones who've been searching for us all along. Have you ever experienced a moment when your professional life intersected with your personal history in unexpected ways? Sometimes the work we chooses us back in the most surprising ways. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories about family, fate, and the connections that bind us together across time. Next week, we'll share the story of a corporate merger that introduced a new boss and one employee's reaction that shocked everyone in the room.